worse, Zamir White or DeAndre Swift?
I don't want either one of them.
Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
All right. Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. Code Mayo at Underdog to get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. Use it on any sport, but I prefer football because I like talking football because these are the Week 3 NFL Power Rankings, 1 to 32. Yes, we're going to do every team. Now, after we heard the feedback from last week, we will talk about your team. Don't worry about that. We'll go team by team fantasy notes as well with injuries, pickups, and everything else that you need to know to set your rosters. Jake, I'm doing the ranking show without you this year because I'm not making it like an hour and a half long, and people miss you a lot. But I told them to watch on Mondays with me and Jake.
I don't believe that they miss me. Do they really?
They did. They did. Listen,
is it just
tell people where they can listen to, because you have a rankings podcast yourself. If people want to listen to that, tell them where they can find it.
They do. And by the way, apologies for the hat. I've been trying to do a little bit nicer for your show. I still wear my t-shirts, but I had the dentist this morning, so like the hair went all over the place.
They messed up your hair at the dentist?
No, because they lean all over top of you, and then and I had to come home and go straight on Sirius XM. So I apologize. I've been trying to dress like at least hair-wise nicer for your show because you always look so good. We actually talked about that before. But anyway, All in Fantasy. It's not All in Football anymore because we had to change the name, but also new logo for it. Yeah, All in Fantasy is where as the blower comes by the front house. Waiver show on Tuesdays. Ranks with Meanie usually on Wednesdays. Sometimes I'll have a different guest for the rank show, but that's where I have my ranks, and they're at The Athletic. I'm sure you're having a great time without me on the ranks, though, instead of yelling at you about 14 versus 16.
Well, I just kind of go through and hit out the key points. I'm releasing that on Wednesday afternoons, both on the Mayo Media YouTube channel and on the Pat Mayo Experience audio feed. And I'm doing those quick hitters, 5 to 10 minutes every single morning on the YouTube channel. So please go subscribe, like while you're here as well. And the Fantasy Football Picks and Bets feed if you just want a quick hitter of a recap of the news that has happened and any news updates that come your way. And you just want it quick, boom, and you're out the door. That's what I got for you this football season. Let's jump into the power rankings. I have two teams in my tier 1 right now. We'll mix this up going 32 to 1, 1 to 32 every single week. Hey, we'll see what order we want to go in. I have the Chiefs at number 1 and Philly, who is yet to play as we record this, at number 2. And that is my only tier 1. Only teams in tier 1, 1 and 2. Would you throw anyone else into that mix?
Nope. I'm actually 100% with you on this one. I think there's an easy 1, 2. And then there, at least for me, if I was doing a tier, I hadn't thought about it beforehand, but 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe I'd probably have 4 or 5 teams in the next tier, but I think they're on a level of their own unless something goes sideways and the Eagles get upset tonight.
Even if the Eagles get upset, like I'm not like, listen, if you just wanted to see where the team's record is, I suggest you check out the NFL standings. That's not what this is. These are the power rankings. Like if Vegas somehow beats Kansas City in like 3 weeks from now, they're not going ahead of Kansas City unless Patrick Mahomes is out for the year or something like that. But that's how some people do see these things. Like going from week 1 to week 2, I feel like we were a little bit pensive, like especially with my New Orleans ranking. And New Orleans people came at me for it too. I was like, I'm like the only person who picked the Saints to win that division. And just because I didn't have them ranked as a top 5 team in football, people are very triggered by the entire experience. But I did move them up this week. I just looking at KC, they've basically put together a C, maybe C plus effort the first 2 weeks, and they're still undefeated. And they beat Baltimore and Cincinnati.
So to your point about that is why I say the Eagles is I'm not knocking them down the ranks by 7 spots. But if you're going against the banged up Kirk Cousins, Atlanta Falcons, and you lose this game, even without AJ Brown, that's what I'm saying. Like it would knock them off tier 1. Like I would almost say if we're doing the show tomorrow, Eagles lose, Chiefs are on their own, similar to like, things we do in fantasy, but they're on their own versus the Eagles being there with them. I would just put the Eagles down into the conversation with like, I'm sure we're going to talk very shortly about the 49ers who lost the game. They really should, like they played worse than a C, I think, and they almost like were in contention late almost. But I think that's the conversation we have. Like they kind of feel like the 49ers if they lose tonight.
Yeah, we saw this with the Patriots for years, that like every year, like the second week of October, people are like, oh my God, is this the end of the Patriots? And they'd just be fine. and Kansas City's still winning these games where it looks like they're simply just going through the motions of preseason. Now, there is news. Hollywood Brown could be out for the year. Drop him in fantasy. He might come back in like late November, December, whatever it is. He's not worth holding on to. But Isaiah Pacheco is going to injured reserve. He has a broken fibula, or a fractured fibula, sorry. But we don't know the extent of how fractured it is, if that makes any sense. Apparently, if it's like a straight line fracture, that's like less time. If it kind of looks like a spider web or a piece of broken glass, that's real bad news. So I guess when we think about the pickups this week, obviously at running back, would you go Carson Steele or would you go Samaje Perine? Because I'm on Team Perine right now, but I don't think that he's like a guy that you go and blow all your fab for. Yeah, like he's the number one pickup. Steele's probably a good pickup at the same time. But what I saw from them, especially when Pacheco was still in, they're going to use Steele in these short yardage situations. He might even get like a split carry or maybe even a few more carries than Samaje Perine. I just think Samaje Perine's the better back.
I would have too, but I'm going to go Steele slightly over Perine as of right now because of what you're saying, is that I do think when we get down to the goal line, it's going to be Steele. And I don't think this is necessarily like a Perine getting the passing game work on a lot of teams. We'd be like, oh, we want the pass catcher, especially in half and full point PPR, mostly because Mahomes isn't going to run it in, averaging a robust 2 rushing touchdowns a season. And yes, they do throw plenty, even to offensive linemen. But I think if they are going to take these opportunities, it's not like, haha, surprise, Jerick McKinnon. I think it's going to be Carson Steele with Perine being in his role, which is fine. Maybe it's a 55-45 and it's very close, but it's kind of like the Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. And your argument might be, well, Jalen Warren's the better option if they're both getting similar run. And I could see that. I'm just worried that Perine's not going to get that, only because when they brought him in, that he's behind Steele in the playbook and everything. It could be wrong. And that's why I say this. Like, I lean towards Steele. I'm not going to say you're wrong to say you want Perine. Before the season started, I wanted Perine until I saw the first 2 games. But to your point about how crazy on Fab, if you lost Pacheco and Mixon, then maybe I'd go into the 30s for both and just hope I got one of them. But if I'm just a team that's like, yeah, you know what, I could use another running back, I'd probably stick in like the teens to 20, maybe 25 at the most, and kind of put similar bids on both and just be happy if I got one.
Do you think any of this usage rate that we've seen, like it really seems like they're trying to make Carson Steele happen, but do you think any of that has to do with Perine didn't join the team until like 3 days before the season? Maybe he doesn't know all the playbook?
No, that's what I'm bringing up. I think that's a possibility. Like, but we've also seen Perine before. He's better than Charbonnet, and this is why people are coming at me to talk about last week's rankings. I didn't have Charbonnet as a top 24. He was like 25 or 26.
Oh, I had him at 18, like, Jake. We would have gotten into an argument about that.
There you go. And everyone's like, why is Charbonnet so low? And the touchdown saved his day, but it's because yesterday is now the 3rd time we've seen him have the entire backfield to himself and disappoint. He's not been very good with all the work. And Perine has been, but he's also had some disappointing games. I'm saying there's a world where Perine is best as a timeshare, and this is going to be a frustrating 50-50 split. And there is a world, like, you're right, there's a legitimate outcome where Perine just, once he's up to speed, maybe even this week or by week 4, all of a sudden it's Perine 60%. And that's why I would take the chance on either one of them. But at the same time, I wouldn't go crazy just because this isn't a Jordan Mason taking over for Christian McCaffrey scenario.
See, that's exactly what the point that I really want to get to. Like, because you lost Pacheco, it's not like, oh, I'm going to just waste all my fab on one of these guys, and it's all right, I have a top 10 running back. You don't, unless one of them really pulls out ahead, but I don't think there's anything to indicate that as of right now. You can find all of my running back and positional rankings for pickups in the Mayo Media newsletter. Now, you can subscribe to that for free. I would encourage you to do that, but I've provided the link down in the description, and I'll update that in real time as well, along with the injury report, so all the way through Tuesday evening in case some more news ends up popping up, and then we're off to the races. You'll be able to consult that sheet if you want to go do that. So I have Perine and Steele 1 and 2. After that, at running back, I went Bucky Irving, Damian Pierce, Braylon Allen, Jalen Wright, and Ty Chandler, and I put in addendum at number 4 with Damian Pierce that if Damian Pierce misses another week with the hamstring, and we know that going into waivers, then it would be Cam Akers as the number 4 pickup. But I just don't think Cam Akers is any good, so I wouldn't really want to rely on him. And Rachaad White is banged up. He came back into the game, but he's already dealing with a groin injury. Bucky Irving's getting more work in that offense, which frankly looks good.
Hey, I'm happy to victory lap this one. I was all over on Bucky Irving.
You can't victory lap something where the guy has like a total of 4 fantasy points for the year so far. You can't do that yet.
No, we can. We can 100% because I'm going to take my opportunities because I got to make up as much ground as possible for Cam Akers last year. Jokes aside, Bucky Irving's threat. The funny thing was to go into preseason, you and I have talked about it. I talked about it on All in Fantasy, basically everywhere, is I thought Bucky Irving's threat to Rachaad White was potentially the passing game and being 35% of the workload. And because of Rachaad White was so volume dependent last year, that was going to hurt Rachaad White from being an RB1 because he was so poor in the run game. Coming over into this season, injury aside, in that game yesterday, it's still through the first 2 weeks when even before being hurt, he's been inefficient in the run game as expected. And Bucky Irving's been pushing more into that facet and the passing game. Now, Rachaad White still has the edge in the passing game, but he's been pushing enough overall that we might be headed towards, to use the Steelers comparison, Bucky Irving might be Jaylen Warren in this scenario where we're all sitting here going, wow, he's the better one. He should be getting more touches. And maybe the Bucs make that change. If you look at it with his organization, it's different to when Rachaad White's there. It's not, like he hasn't been there that long, but it is a little bit different of a change with the leaving of Canales, where maybe like, hey, maybe we just like Bucky Irving a little bit more because this isn't necessarily like everybody's holdover from drafting Rachaad White.
Tier number 2 in the power rankings, I have 4 teams, and they go 3 through 6. I went Buffalo at number 3, Houston at number 4, the Niners at number 5, and I kept the Lions at number 6. Because I felt like they probably should have won that game. And there was 2 critical points very early on in the week 2 games that I felt like really threw off the momentum. Listen, Dallas didn't have a ton of momentum in that game against New Orleans, but Tolbert fell down. Or he didn't fall down. He slipped on a slant route. And it ended up Dak just throwing it to the other team because Tolbert couldn't get himself back up to catch the ball. It like went just over his hands because he was partially falling down. And it was just over for them after that. A similar thing happened very early in the Detroit game. They probably still should have won at some point, but apparently Baker Mayfield was Michael Vick all of a sudden. They just, after he started running for 15 yards a pop, they weren't like, man, we should probably watch out for that. But no, they didn't adjust on the fly that way. But there was just a massive, like, it was either holding or pass interference, whatever you want to call it, on Jamison Williams. Like they just stopped him in his route where Goff was going to hit him in stride. He just launched it to the other team in the first quarter. And it felt like it just threw them out of sorts for like 15 minutes. And they weren't able to fully recover from that. So I think that their defensive line, obviously Hutchinson is amazing and he's going to provide real problems. And once this offense gets back in gear, I'm willing to stick with my priors on Detroit that they're a very good team, but they're the bottom of this tier right now for me.
So they're not in this tier for me. They would be in the next tier. I actually have the same other 3, though. I would actually go the Texans third. I really, as much as that game was a mess at times, it kind of goes to your argument about the Chiefs, is that they kind of played a weak game compared to what they play, but it was against a very good defense who showed problems for the Texans. And I think the Bears defense is going to show problems for everybody this year and came through. They fought. Like similar to your, again, I go back to the Chiefs thing. Like they fought in a game that they kind of played pretty poorly and against a really good defense and came away with that win. So I would go the Texans, then the Bills. Nitpicky there. I still have concerns about the Bills defense actually as well.
Absolutely. But the one common thing about all of these teams, especially the top 5, actually we'll say the top 4, they have real quarterbacks. And that's going to be a decider for me in a lot of these things. Now I just think Allen is better than Stroud.
Okay, I think that as of what we know, but
and here's the thing too. The overall team. Maybe Houston's defense isn't that good either. They just happened to play the Bears last week.
Remains to be seen. We'll see more.
Buffalo's
this week
D look good against Tua.
The Buffalo's D always looks good against Tua. We know that.
I suppose that's true. Like the Niners, that's a blip. Coming off a beatdown on Monday night, short week. And they've lost their last 8 in Minnesota, and it was a revenge game for Sam Darnold. And like you said, they probably still could have won the game.
They could have. And I'm buying low on Brandon Ayuk everywhere I can, for that being said. And Brock Purdy looked like the bad Brock Purdy that people were concerned about, even when he was the starter. So, like, again, just a blip of a week. These things happen. I mean, like, let's be honest about it. Like, there's a lot of games just through week 2 alone that you could be like, man, these are things that we never expected. And we'll get further down the list. The Ravens and the 49ers offenses both looked off to a degree in week 2, despite the fact that the Ravens hit some really nice plays, and we'll talk about them later. But anyway, so I go 49ers after those 2. So I go Texans, Bills, 49ers. And then my next team is not the Lions. And like, I'm not coming for like the people last week to be like, haha, Jake likes us, but you don't, Pat. I would put the Saints. They would be next. Their defense is something that has to be considered. Even without Lattimore, they looked good yesterday. And that offense, You know this. We talked, and I wish more people paid attention to the column because I spent so much time on it. But I know it's not really one of those clickbaity type of columns. It was the pre-snap motion effect on offenses and wide receivers specifically. Kubiak has changed that offense with the pre-snap motion, and it is unstoppable right now. It is not going to continue. They are going to regress. Derek Carr is not going to play this elite all year. But Rashid Shaheed, in my opinion, is a legit answer. He's out there 33% of the team's targets before the fourth quarter, 30% of the team's targets tied with Olave on first and second down. He's not going away. This team is not going away. Kamara, your guy, I was on with you with that one, is Kamara this year. He's back to still being Kamara. I think the Saints are the next best team.
I have them outside the top 10 ever so slightly as that tier of 2-0 teams. And I tried to put those all on a tier of their own and try to rank them in order. So I kept Detroit where they are. We'll get to the Saints in a second. I did want to bring up A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra, though, because Amon-Ra, I don't know if he's going to play this week. I think he has a knee injury. I don't know how serious it is. But if that's the case, who would you pick up any of the other Lions receivers? Because I think that Tim Patrick might be a good pickup if that's the case.
He might be, but this is a team that's also gone to Khalif Raymond. I think this is more of what we're going to see tonight with Monday Night Football, is that the answer might just be better Laporta. Laporta has been kind of non-existent through the first two games, and for tonight, no A.J. Brown. I think we get an uptick for Dallas Goedert versus chasing Dotson or anything like that. So I see it, but I don't know that it's not Khalif Raymond, who has put up numbers in the past and some of they've turned to as the veteran, but maybe it is Tim Patrick. We're excited for Tim Patrick, but I don't know how much he knows the playbook after coming over late in the preseason too. He might be limited just for that facet where instead of running 50 routes, he's running 28 because those are the ones he knows.
So you might be correct, but the one thing I did notice that he and Raymond basically ran the same amount of routes and played the same amount of snaps on Sunday, which I thought was encouraging because Raymond's been there for like 375 years and Tim Patrick just showed up at the facility. That it seems like an easy way. It's a lot like Noah Brown in Washington, where he was taking Diami Brown off the field, but he's going to be the starter soon enough. Like, he is the only guy on that team, it seems, who has any sort of connection with Jaden Daniels. So I think you're going to see him usurp the other Brown in that spot. And he's a great yak guy. He's a big body. And I think that's going to be very good for Jaden Daniels in that offense. Someone who can really get it done over the middle, stiff arm someone, and then take off using his speed. So I like him in that capacity. He's like a lower end type guy. Obviously not like a must go pickup. But in terms of Tim Patrick, if Brown misses time, we don't even know if Brown is going to miss time. I just wanted to put that on the radar. And in terms of AJ Brown, like in the Monday night game, if I had to make a pickup because I lost him and this is all I got left, I'd play Mooney before I played Dotson.
Oh, I would too, but I have a legit concern that could still be a zero, mostly because of Kirk Cousins. We have to see. If I'm the Eagles, I just said this to Meany on Sirius XM. If I'm the Eagles, there is not a single defensive play I don't send an extra defender at Kirk Cousins because he can't move right now. He can't play action. He can't drop back. I need to see him be able to do one of those two things before. And honestly, if you're talking about the safest play, it might actually be Ray McLeod because of that, because he's just. What?
I was just, you stole the words out of my mouth. Like, if you need like 4 points, he might be your guy.
Yeah. He's the one, like the over reception prop, Ray McLeod for tonight.
So that was my tier 2. My tier 3 actually only features 2 teams I'm not willing to give up on yet. It's Baltimore and Cincinnati at 7 and 8, both 0-2 teams that, obviously Cincinnati looked horrible in week 1 against the Patriots, but maybe the Patriots defense is really good. This we don't know. And if Baltimore, it's a bad loss yesterday. And I do have concerns about their offense because people talked about, yesterday that their offense looked out of sorts. I thought their offense looked out of sorts in every non-Isaiah likely play. It looked terrible against the Chiefs too. They just did a lot around the line of scrimmage. I think they're going to get this figured out. So I'm willing to give them another week of both these teams because Cincinnati looked markedly better in week 2 than they did in week 1, especially defensively.
They did, but I'm much further down on Cincinnati. I'm hoping Higgins comes back and fixes this offense, and Yoshivas, fun for him to get his 2 touchdowns at like 2 yards. But I just feel like this is another team, like watching it, it's just there's something off. They're not connecting, and whether you want to say that, well, that's good because they're playing down to this level where they could almost win games and everything's still going wrong. So I'm with you. Like, I still have Cincinnati almost inside my top 10. I'm just not ready to say like Higgins let me put it this way, Pat. If I asked you what fixes the Bengals, like, what's the answer besides things just going right? Like that doesn't feel like a real answer for me. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm legitimately asking you a question, like, what fixes the Bengals?
I actually kind of think that, though. It's the extra reps. Obviously, the return of T. Higgins, I do think, because I just listen, Yoshivas is fun and everything, like you mentioned, but there is a precipitous drop off between the talent of T. Higgins and Andre Yoshivas.
Right.
If you can run him as a 3 in this like red zone presence, that's great. That's an extra weapon that you can have. But T. Higgins is like a legitimate top 20 receiver in the league. Like, not having him out there. And I think we're starting to see like the rust of Jamar Chase. We've seen the rust of Brandon Ayuk from holding out all training camp. We're seeing the rust of Jamar Chase holding out all training camp. And we've seen this with the Bengals year over year, too. Like, they're horrid, like the month of September. I just still believe in Burrow. Maybe once the tips get a little less frosted, maybe he'll be fine.
Is that what it is? They bled into his brain? Is that what you're telling me?
Listen, as someone who did that once in their life, it's not a great look.
I actually never did it. I did have the terrible buzzed hair underneath the long hair coming down to here.
Like the old school, like mid-90s mushroom cut?
No, but like, no, because I had more like the Zach Morris, because then like I would still like brush it to the side. But I always got joked for it because I was a 3-and-D guy before 3-and-D. I'm old. 3-and-D in basketball. I could only shoot 3-pointers and play defense, but when I shot because of the stupid hair, I'd have to like push it back out of my eye when I ran down court. So everybody, the Jake Ciely 3 was go like this every single time. So yeah, it was super awesome haircut.
So tier 4 is this tier of the 2-0 team. So this is the order that I put them in. I put the Pittsburgh at number 9, Tampa at number 10, Minnesota at number 11, New Orleans at number 12, and the Chargers at number 13. And speaking of the Chargers, I have Quentin Johnson as my number 1 wide receiver pickup this week. Would you disagree with that?
No. And we talked about on my brief pod recap of week 2 there is that Quentin Johnston he's fell into this opportunity, but he's made the opportunity the most. First round talent. I don't know if I said it to you, but I know I said it to Meanie, and the fact that the drop percentage for Keenan Allen was actually higher than Quentin Johnston last year. The problem was you can't drop touchdowns. Yeah, we saw them. The touchdowns, the big plays, they were island games. It's just they were magnified by the situations and eyes on them. And joking aside, I think I even said it maybe to you in the offseason, is like Quentin Johnston came into this league and everybody said, he's raw. He's a great talent, makes a lot of good plays and catches, but will lose some catches because of his rawness, doesn't run all the routes very well. And his rookie season was essentially that. And people are like, oh, he sucks. He was exactly who you thought he was supposed to be. And yet he sucks because he didn't break off in his first season. So I was on Joshua Palmer, you know that, because he was running as the 1, but he's been banged up through the first 2 weeks and left in week 2. And Quentin Johnson took the most of this opportunity with no DJ Chark too. So I'm with you. If Shaheed's not out there, because Shaheed's still out there in 10-teamers and stuff like that, obviously he's the pickup, but I'm with you. Quentin Johnston's probably, I haven't finished, but I think he's going to be either 1 or 2 for the wide receiver pickups this week.
I would pick up Shaheed before I picked up Johnston, but he's owned in more than 50% of leagues, so he doesn't qualify for this list. After that, I went Alec Pierce at number 2, because even when Downs returns this week, I think it's Mitchell who gets pushed aside a little bit. And Pierce there's not very many definitive roles on this team, but I feel like Pierce has his on the Colts.
Yes, but I'm not as high on that, mostly because even with Pierce being the 2, Downs could kick outside some, and it's the same reason I was off Pittman this year. I have 0 shares of Pittman. I had Michael Pittman as a wide receiver 3 this preseason. Everybody told me I was stupid. It comes down to target share for everybody. It's like, if there was only 2 options involved, similar to the Ravens, if there's only 2 options involved, tight end / Flowers, cool. You start involving a third person, it's like, I don't really want to get too involved outside of who the clear number 1 is. And the clear number 1 is still Michael Pittman. So I'm not that excited about Pierce just because I don't think the volume's ever going to be high. As a wide receiver 4, hoping that I get 3 for 80, sure, but you also might get a big fat 0 because my excitement for Adonai Mitchell being able to take the role as the 2 and basically replace Downs by Downs being out doesn't look like that's happening, because he was still clearly 3rd in the routes run in week 2. So I do wonder if Downs is going to take away from Pierce as well.
So Pierce ended up running more routes and played more snaps than Michael Pittman against Green Bay. It was 53 to 48, 34 to 33 in routes run. Then there was a big drop off to Mitchell. Then Austin Doolin was still getting involved a little bit. He ended up playing 24 of the 56 offensive snaps for the Colts. So I think that Downs mixes in. I think that Pierce is just going to be out there. He's their big play guy. as crazy as that sounds. And I think that he'd had, like, out of everyone, and we know that Downs had the rapport earlier on last year when Richardson was still healthy, but it seems like Richardson has built that up with Pierce right now. Now, I'm with you that I think that like mid 40s is probably going to be the rank. But when I take the look at the rest of my list, it's like Quentin Johnson, number one, he's a pickup. Alec Pierce, if you need someone, bench depth, you go pick him up. After that, it's like Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Naylor, Tim Patrick, Noah Brown, Jalen Tolbert. There's not a whole lot of good wide receivers on the waiver wire to pick up.
No, it gets gross. I'm not going to disagree with you, but it really comes down to I wouldn't put, even being the number 2 again. I'm not done with my waivers yet, but even if he ended up, which I don't think he will, I think he'll be inside the top 5. But 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, like the only one I'm going aggressively after, well, Shaheed obviously again if he's out there in your leagues, but Quentin Johnston, all the rest I'd be like $2, $3, $4, $5 at most on my fab.
So back to that tier 4, Pittsburgh at 9, Tampa, Minnesota, New Orleans, and the Chargers. Presumably Pittsburgh could be a lot lower, but their defense is scary. Now, maybe against a real offense, they don't look so good. And if they ever need to score 20 points in a game, Jake, I don't know if they can do it, but their schedule toughens up severely starting in like 3 weeks' time. We'll see what kind of real team that they are, but I think they can kind of cruise against some of these easier opponents. I'm actually very curious to see what happens between the Steelers and Chargers this week, because I think that the Chargers have kind of morphed themselves into West Coast Pittsburgh in a weird way. Like obviously their defense isn't as good, but they're playing sort of that like banging style that you would just kind of associate with Pittsburgh, and it's working for the Chargers offensively. But again, they've played no one. They played the Raiders and the Panthers.
Yeah, I would still take Pittsburgh over the Chargers by a few spots. Where did you have Seattle on this whole list?
I have them. I have them 2 tiers down. Like they're actually no. I have them in the next tier. So.
Oh, okay. Because you said all the 2-0s, so I thought that included the Seahawks.
No, it's funny. Like all this. Let's call them the surprise. To at least in my mind, the surprise 2-0 teams. Listen. If you told me the Seahawks schedule, I would have told you they would have started 2-0. Like, I don't really know anything about the Seahawks. They've looked mediocre against teams that I thought were kind of bad, but maybe the teams that they played had better defenses than I thought. So it's really hard for me to get a grasp on Seattle because Denver's defense has looked all right through 2 weeks. The Patriots defense looks all right. But Geno looks good is one thing I'll say.
Oh, yeah. Geno definitely looks good. So I'm pretty with you. I would take the Steelers over the Bengals right now. And I know, unless I'm also crazy on this one, you haven't mentioned the Cowboys yet, right?
No, they're a part of that Seattle tier. So I put Tampa over New Orleans just because I think that Tampa's wins, Washington's like a whatever. It's better than beating Carolina. That's like a real win for both these teams this week. But it felt like a snowball rolling down the hill for the Saints against Dallas. Like they jumped out early, they had these big plays, and they just kind of steamrolled. I'd be curious to see what happens if they get into a rock fight with the team. And I felt like Tampa really cleared that hurdle this week, going into Detroit, playing back and forth, and emerging out the other side. And they were the better team, quote unquote, on paper coming into the year anyway. So I'm still going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. So for that grouping, like I go Saints, Lions, Ravens, Bucks, Steelers to round out my top 10. And then that next group, I'm with you. Like a different mix, but Bengals, Cowboys, Vikings, Chargers, and then before I have the Jets in there too. I think for the fact that, because I can't believe, I know Tim just got super excited if he's watching this. Like their defense, legitimately good. That throw that Levis made for the touchdown doesn't happen at the next 99 times he attempts it. So let's be real about that. And blaming Sauce Gardner or whatever is just stupid. I saw somebody tweeting out the stats that Gardner gave up in that game. And I'm like, okay, most of it was that one play, and most of that doesn't usually ever happen. But the Jets, for the fact that their run game is so good, and Aaron Rodgers still really isn't doing much of anything, and that they're 1-1, and there's a world where they are 2-0. I think they deserve to be in this group with like the surprise 2-0s, and then maybe teams that got up, like the Ravens, I'd still take definitively over them, but I think they deserve to I think they're kind of more in line with the Bengals. Like you tell me the Jets Bengals right now, I don't know that's necessarily like a coin flip for me.
I'm just trying to figure out like if we were like making Super Bowl odds where I would put some of these teams right now and how good that I think they are. And I think when it comes down to, like I said, I kind of defer to who has the better quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback the Jets have had in ages. He's not as good as Joe Burrow.
Oh, there's no question about it, but I think that you could talk about your Super Bowl odds and also look at the division and say now that Tua's potentially done for the year. I think the Jets might have a better path to the, well, actually, no, I would say the Jets have a better path to the playoffs than the Bengals do in that division right now.
See, I don't, because they're what, a game back? Well, I guess they're 2 games back. Pittsburgh's 2-0, right? But they still, but Pittsburgh has to play Cleveland twice and the Bengals twice. Like,
so do the Bengals. They still have to play the Ravens and everything.
The Bengals, but I think that the Bengals and Ravens are pretty even. And I think that like maybe that Pittsburgh will beat those teams and really emerge above. But I think that the Bengals and Ravens are going to be able to score points on the Steelers. I don't know if the Steelers can score points. Like, it's great when you play
Neither do I.
It's great when you play like the shitty teams over and over, but that stops at some point.
Of course. And they really haven't asked Justin Fields to do much at the quarterback, which is why he hasn't even been a QB1 so far for us in fantasy. But that being said, I'm just saying right now, on paper, like, you include the Steelers. My original point was Jets versus Bengals, but Jets versus Bengals versus Steelers, I mean, the way these teams have looked, at least to me, through the first 2 weeks, I would take the Jets over both, even though the Steelers are 2-0.
Oh, I guess it really depends on what you think of the Titans. But even to go back to your point about Sauce Gardner in that play, watching the replay of it, I still thought it got picked, and I don't know how Calvin Ridley caught the ball.
Really? The Matrix? I don't know. Don't know how to explain that one either.
So the team that we didn't talk about was number 11, one spot ahead of New Orleans. I had Minnesota. Like, I thought that they dominated.
I'm 14.
They dominated week 1. They looked really, and we saw this at points last year too, where the Flores defense looked really good to a point, and then it just stopped, and they were an absolute sieve. I worry that might happen to them again.
As in for the season, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my hesitancy too. Actually, Brock Purdy was it Brock Purdy or was it IU? Somebody on the 49ers said give a ton of respect to the Flores. They just throw crazy crap out there at us. And look, we've done this dance, so yeah, I understand your concern. Maybe it holds out through the entire season. I think part of the real reason though might be because if you look up and down the defense's roster for the Vikings, it's not like they have a ton of top tier talent. They have some, but I think he's doing the best with what he has, and I don't know if it can hold up through that the entire season, because I go back to it and it's similar to the argument earlier in talking about the Chiefs or even the Bills. Like, not even their best football, one of their worst, arguably the worst 49ers game we've probably seen since 2022 to go past throughout the entire last season. Maybe there's a game I'm not thinking off the top of my head from last year, but definitely one of their worst played games in a long time, and they still almost came back to be in contention to, if not win, push it into overtime. Although no, they would have had a touchdown to kick the extra point. So I'm not fully invested in the Vikings yet. You're a little bit more so. I don't hate you for it. Like, that's the biggest thing. And probably, to say it crazy, like, I'd still take 1-1 Dallas over the 2-0 Vikings.
Yeah, we gotta show our Skull brethren a little bit of love here. I know there's a lot of people in
They're at 14.
Listen, I have them at number 11. Jefferson seems like he's going to be fine. He was at the facility today, so I'm not too worried about him not playing. Maybe he's like 90%, 85%, not 100%. That's good. And Jordan Addison might return as well. That would actually bump Jalen Naylor down my pickup rankings, but until I actually see him on the field or get a full practice in, I'm going to assume he's not playing.
I would probably assume too, but it's interesting for waiver purposes. If Addison or Jefferson's out, I think Naylor's a good deep play. If both of them play, obviously out the window. But if both of them are out, I still don't want Naylor. I don't want Naylor as the one. He's one of those ones where it's like it's going to fall apart when you ask him to play the number 1 role.
Yeah, and I feel like that's happened to Yoshevich a lot as well. They're asking him to be the 2. He's just not good enough to be the 2. He's a good 3, like, extra guy on the field, red zone target. But if you ask him to run real routes against real corners, he's just not that good.
There's just a problem, Andre. You're not any good.
A few years back, the irons were the best part of my golf game. But after a swing change about 2.5 years ago, my driver's an absolute weapon at this point, but all of a sudden I couldn't hit my long irons, and even some of my short irons just were not going on the same trajectory that I always wanted them to, or at least that they used to do. So when I heard how the new PXG Black Ops irons can dramatically improve my game, of course I had to give them a try. Anything to improve my golf game. So I called up PXG and I got my current irons, and I took the PXG Irons Challenge, and it has been amazing. The consistency off the club face is unparalleled to any club that I have ever used. Best thing about these irons is because I feel so comfortable that I'm gonna hit the sweet spot on them, I can control the club face, the high, the low, the cut, the draw, no problem. And the new PXG Black Ops irons are the game improvement missile launchers that are going to give you explosive distance, and it's going to feel softer than a baby bunny. The new Black Ops irons are incredibly easy to hit and maximize performance and fun, because getting better is fun. Oh, and they're only $149.99 a stick. That's a great price for a great golf iron. Take the PXG Irons Challenge. It's a ton of fun, and if PXG's new Black Ops irons don't outperform your current irons by delivering either more distance or tighter dispersion, that means better accuracy, during your fitting, you'll get a $100 MasterCard rewards card. Hurry! This offer ends October 7th. Book your fitting today at pxg.com. That's pxg.com. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Tier number 5 is where I have the rest of these teams that you kind of talked about. I have Dallas at 14, the Jets at 15, Seattle at 16, and Green Bay at 17. Mm-hmm. Green Bay, it was such a big win for them. It gives them breathing room for the season and allowing Love to get healthier by the time that he comes back. Like, that was an imperative win to keep their season alive, I feel.
I'm with you. And if you look at it, it's not arguably, it is the best NFL game Malik Willis has played, but they asked him to play within himself. The fact that the completions and what he was able to do, of course, that kills any passing game until Love gets back. But being able to stay afloat, you told me Willis goes 500 while Love is out. Everybody would consider that a massive win, and they've already got the first win under their belts. So, yeah, the great game plan. Obviously, they're going to run the ball a ton, which is a different story for us in fantasy. But I think you could argue right now, you just tell me, because we know Love is coming back, and it's probably, 2 or 3 weeks at the most, the Packers over the Seahawks, I'd actually take the Packers.
It's interesting right now because I do think that the path in the AFC West could be a little bit easier because there's some pretty good defenses, and obviously I like Minnesota at the moment. My worry with Love is that he re-injures himself when he comes back. That's why I think this win was so key, because I think it buys them an extra week. Like, if they lose this game and then they go into Tennessee this week and lose again and they're 0-3, then they're going to force Love to play in week 4. Then he probably gets hurt for the season. So especially if Willis can win this revenge game this week against the Titans and the Packers can go to 2-1, they can sit Love to like week 5, week 6 and make sure that he's actually healthy coming back. So I think this is a big hinge week for the Packers again.
I think I agree with you on that aspect, is not having to rush Love back. But that's why, again, as of right now, even if it was 4 more weeks, I think it's kind of your argument before about like saying, well, if the Eagles lose, I'm not going to put them down behind a 2-0 team. I'm taking the Packers, feeling like what I know for the Packers going forward with Love coming back, and I would just take them the rest of the season. Like, again, if they played Malik Willis this week, I'd take the Seahawks. But I think for the rest of the season, I would still take the Packers over the Seahawks to have a better record at the end of the year.
I guess it's my worry that Love's not going to be 100%, and you always have that lingering fear that he re-aggravates the knee injury or he can't plant exactly like he used to, and he's just diminished. And if you do come back too early, then you just don't get healthy for the rest of the season. Then you're just that guy. And if they don't have peak Jordan Love, they're not going to be as good. And that's a part of me factoring that in.
And that's fair. That's why I'm not going to argue that much with you on it.
Dallas, 1 week blip. New Orleans is really good. Bad matchup. Or what we did see was Jalen Tolbert run the most routes of any receiver. Now, they were getting blown out by the end of the game, but I think a lot of that had to do with Jake Ferguson being out, that they didn't want to play Schoonmaker 85% of the time. Like, the tight ends split on the field a ton, and they ran a bunch of 3 wide receiver sets, which not a great look on that offense.
No, it's not. I think Dallas has legitimately concerns on defense, honestly. It doesn't look like they're doing much to stop anybody. Like, forget the Saints and being on fire. It's just through the first 2 weeks, like, this is supposed to be one of the best defenses in the NFL, And even if you throw half the Saints game out the window and just say like, all right, well, let's say as a whole, maybe it was just a really off week, as you said. Maybe the Saints are just super on fire and people are going to figure them out and figure out what Kubiak is doing. All that being said, Dallas just doesn't look like a shutdown defense to start. And Dak Prescott plays well at times. Obviously threw a ton last year, plenty of touchdowns, but it still comes back to, yeah, sure, Tolbert did that, but he's not past Brandon Cooks yet. I think Brandon Cooks at this point of career, we talked about him in fantasy specifically. You were more in on him than I was, but it still comes down to the answer that I have as this team. Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, whoever you want it to be, they don't have a real number 2. Brandon Cooks at this stage of his career should be a 3. Maybe this is also no Jake Ferguson, who seemed to be their number 2, similar to a Trey McBride situation. But something doesn't look right with the Cowboys. I'd still give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. I would take another week or 2 before I really want to crush them in my rankings. That's why I have them at 13. But it's not going to take much. They look that bad in another game this week, then I think they deserve to be further down than I have them where you have them.
Correct. They get the benefit of the doubt for 1 week, is going into Cleveland and winning, I do still think is an impressive win against that defense. If you do want to see the full injury report, the full pickups list and everything, and even listen, you can find the power rankings down in the description of this video. You can find it in the newsletter as well. That's free. The link is down in the description. You can go get it right there and it gets updated in real time. Join for free. Help us out over at Mayo Media Network. You use code Mayo and Underdog as well. Get yourself that deposit bonus up to $1,000 and get in on it. Seattle, Ken Walker probably misses another week, I'm guessing.
Yeah, probably. But again, I go back to the Charbonnet situation. Is just he's better as a time. Actually, he's not even great as a timeshare.
Yeah, maybe he's just not good.
Might be overrated. Yeah, there you go. Just maybe he's just not that good.
Listen, that happens. How do you feel about Braylon Allen as just a general pickup at running back? Like, is he the lowest end flex that you can get in like a 12-team, 14-team league? Because I do think that he'll be involved in this offense. Rodgers seems to like him.
I do too. I don't know if I would flex him to the level of like a Jalen Warren with, assumingly, Russ Wilson or Jalen Warren last year. I think he's still outside of that. I did have him and still have him as a premier backup. This comes from this. I was higher on Braylon Allen than a lot of people, and a lot of people were like, he doesn't deserve to be in tier 1 of the running backs coming out of the draft class. I thought he did. And I'm not victory lapping it off one game. Like, I'm not even going to make that joke. It's one game before we're like, he's obviously a top 5 backup. It really comes down to, I have no concerns about Breece Hall. This is just, getting a few touches. Look how much Breece Hall still touched the ball in that game. This is not going to turn into a 50-50 or even 60-40 split, but it is clear. My biggest concern about Braylon Allen was how much do they like the other pieces, including Isaiah Davis, who they also drafted. If something happens to Breece Hall, it is the Braylon Allen show, and he'll be in the RB1 conversation. So it's more if he's a premier backup to have than I would say flex yet. I'm not ready to put him in the flex conversation. I'd still take, on a weekly usage basis, I would still take like a Justice Hill over Braylon Allen.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I think they're using Braylon Allen like how a lot of people thought they would use Malachi Corley.
I just think this also has to do with Mike Williams ramping up to speed before Aaron Rodgers also ramping up to speed.
Maybe, but they did play a lot of 2 running back sets, and where Rodgers' mobility is a little bit limited, having someone back there, like 2 guys back there to chip and help him out. And we did see the explosiveness in running these routes out of the backfield. I think it's really going to come down to if Aaron Rodgers trusts these guys or not, and it seems like Braylon Allen's building that trust with him. And
that's certainly fair. Maybe I talk somebody up and then say I'm not there with you yet. Maybe you're right about it. I hope you're right. I'm a big Braylon Allen fan, but it comes back to the Allen Lazard conversation from last week. I poo-pooed the Allen Lazard, go get him on waiver wires and spend a ton of fab, and I was still not expecting it to be that bad in week 2. So sometimes you can be fans or not fans of things and still expect different outcomes.
Yeah, the other thing is, looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown, now that we're doing this in real time, is going to be okay for week number 3. Pacheco, 4 to 12 weeks, depending on how severe that fracture is. And other updated news, Adam Schefter is reporting that Kareem Hunt is going to visit with the Kansas City Chiefs again.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, see, this is why I want to go too crazy on either one of them.
That's where I'm at with you. Like, it feels like they bring someone in or they do it by committee that Pacheco was really the first guy that way. And listen, Clyde Edwards-Helaire can come off IR in 2 weeks?
Yep, after week 4. And we don't know if his head is right. I think
but if it is,
I knew there was a name.
Guy.
Yeah, I was just like I threw out Leonard Fournette was visiting the Colts before the season started, and what if he visits them? But the Kareem Hunt's bigger because he actually knows the system. So that's another one to say don't go too crazy.
So the next tier is tier number 6. It consists of 2 teams for me. I have the Cardinals and the Browns at 18 and 19.
Oh, I'm so much lower on the Browns than you are, but we are lockstep. I do have the Cardinals here.
Okay, so the Cardinals, look, I don't know what to make of the Rams. They're down defensive players. They're out Puka. Kupp gets hurt. They're down 4 offensive linemen. Like, it's not going great for the Los Angeles Rams right now, and they just ran into a fireball. Kyler Murray looked great in that game. Basically, what they were able to do against the Bills for the first quarter in week number 1, they were able to do for 3.5 quarters against the Rams and really stick it to them. And obviously Marvin Harrison starting to look that good is pretty amazing. But I just don't think that the Rams can do anything offensively without their players or offensive line. So I really have no idea how good their defense is, and it could be a real problem. And again, I think they're a lot like the Saints in a way that they're a momentum offense that once you stop them a little bit, you can maybe figure them out and rattle Kyler. But they have the ability to go way up in these if they continue to play well. And we've seen Kyler get off to really hot starts in the season, and then it kind of fades in the second half. That before he went away for a year, that was kind of his thing. And I just think that Cleveland is going to be very much like the Jets of last year, where their defense is going to give them a chance to win most games. And I didn't think that Watson looked that bad in week 2.
Oh God, it's just what's the bar you're giving him?
Oh, Watson
Don't
versus
look like
week
Bryce
1.
Young?
No, like Watson versus week 1, Watson versus week 2. He was markedly better in week 2.
Again, super low bar.
Well, I'm
like
comparing him to himself, and if he plays at that level, that's the level where their defense can win them games.
Oh, I don't know if I'll go that far. I'll give them this week because they get the Giants at home. But you're telling me any 500 team? No, I would take. Should I just save the Browns or should I tell you where I have the Browns? Which do you want?
Tell me where you have the Browns. Like I want to hear how low they are.
24.
Okay, so you would have them a part of this. Like, I have a giant next tier of teams, tier 7. So you would have them in that.
Yes.
I think that. I mean, I guess you could make the case for the Patriots as well, who I do have as the next team. But with the Browns, I just feel like we haven't seen the best of their defense. And obviously, and listen, they were missing 2 of their best offensive linemen as well. I think once they can get back closer to full speed, and if things do go south with Watson and they bring in Jameis, how much higher would you have them?
Ooh. I would say maybe not that much. I would say in that next tier with like Seattle and Green Bay and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I don't think that they're that far behind it right now. And like I think they're kind of a mirror team of Pittsburgh at the moment, where they have this like weird broken offense, but their defense can hold up in these games. And
see,
go ahead.
I was gonna say my problem is if we're gonna talk waivers in this too, is I'm willing to drop now. Again, shallow team, please don't, because if one thing happens to one of the others, they get hurt midweek or even the next game, you're gonna be going to grab the one that didn't get hurt. But in shallow leagues, and if you need options, Jerome Ford is droppable because now they're going to full-blown committee, and that's even with Pierre Strong potentially being out this week. That's the issue, is like I don't trust their backfield. They're going full-blown committee. All these guys getting Deonta Foreman got the start. Jerome Ford still looked good and got some really nice yards for carrying and broke that big play. But what is this backfield? And what is this backfield? And what is Deshaun Watson, which, by the way, 17 targets for Amari Cooper, great buy low because nobody wants him.
No, how could it be
5 for 22 pass, 5 for 17 passing?
If you're going to tell me that Deshaun Watson absolutely stinks, why would you want any of his receivers?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't really want anybody on this team in fantasy.
Then how is he a good buy low? It sounds like you might want to drop him.
Because that's why. Because people are going to drop him, so you could get him for nothing and stash him on your bench with the hope that they have to switch quarterbacks.
Now, you do the thing that I always talk about, where if someone absolutely stinks, you just drop them, and if they're a name, someone will pick them up and play them. That sabotages their team.
No, because if you just pick them up for nothing, you're just going to keep them on your bench. Nobody's picking up Amari Cooper to start him.
I feel like you don't play with regular people in fantasy leagues. People do this stuff all the time. Now, I
try to do
you.
both.
I would try to buy low, and I would keep them on my bench, but I have discipline when it comes to fantasy rosters. Some people do not, Jake.
They lack discipline, is what you're telling me?
They lack discipline. Lucky Pierre Strong looks like 2 to 4 weeks with his hamstring injury. That's the initial
Still,
prognosis.
even so. Don't want to touch this backfield at this point.
Listen, Jerome Ford played 32 of the 72 snaps. Foreman played 27 of the 72, and Strong still got 10. And it was very much the routes were being run by Jerome Ford or Pierre Strong, which Foreman ended up with 8. So it's not like he was absolutely useless out of the backfield. He ended up with 1 target, but he had 14 carries in the game, and all of the short yardage work was his. Like, when I do the week 3 rankings, I think that Foreman needs to come out higher than Jerome Ford.
He does, but as anything more than an RB3 that I don't want to have to use,
Sure.
that's the biggest thing because, well, here, let me make a comparison real quick. When I talked about it on the podcast, I said I compare him to the Panthers. I don't want to trust either one, and that's a much worse offense, although it might be better now with the Andy Dalton news. But I don't want to trust either one because it's such a mishmash of these two. Now it's down to 2 with no Pierre Strong. That, okay, good matchup against the Giants. If it's a Ford game and you started Foreman, you're going to be like, damn it, I should have started Ford. But you still can't even trust it coming out of that game until we see a clear path for 2, which means you have to wait essentially 2 weeks before you even start either one of them as a top 25 running back. And I get it. There are deeper leagues, especially people who are watching us, that will have to start one of them. And I agree with you. If I have to this week, I would lean Foreman. But it's the Cowboys, it's this team, it's the Panthers, it's the Broncos. I want to avoid these backfields altogether because it's more likely you're going to keep picking the wrong one.
If I was I have Foreman as number 6 in the running back pickup rankings. That's behind Braylon Allen for context. But if it came down to like Foreman versus Chuba Hubbard this week, I would play Chuba Hubbard instead. Like
Foreman. Oh, you would?
I would play Chuba, yeah.
I would play Foreman.
Chuba had sneaky 11 points last week. You watch out.
No, yeah, but you look at who they're going against. Carolina at Vegas versus Foreman at home against the Giants run defense. I'll take Foreman in that one.
Nah, you just listen. The Red Rocket's back, baby. He put up like 360 on Seattle last year. Let's go.
Oh, we're going for 7 for 62 for Deontay Johnson this week. No question.
No, it's going to be Adam Thielen.
Oh, God. The old men unite? Is that what you're telling me?
Hey, they did last year. This was like the kickoff of
that,
Adam Thielen.
If Andy Dalton somehow plays all the way through week 16, we get the full revenge tour of all four teams he played for.
So that's probably why they put him in. So we'll get to Carolina. They're last on the list. Spoiler alert. And
yes.
How that ends up working out. Number 20. This is tier number 7. I have New England at number 20. Obviously, they play Thursday night against the Jets. Vegas at 21. Miami at 22. The Bears at 23. The Falcons at 24. They're playing on Monday night. We don't know how they've done in week number 2 yet. Jacksonville, Indy, and then the Rams at 27. I think the Rams might pass a point of no return with injuries. Like if Kupp and Nakua are out to like week 6 or something like that or longer, they're absolutely screwed.
I completely agree with you. And actually, I have the Rams down. Where did you have them? I have the Rams at 25.
I had the Rams at 27. I had them behind Indy and Jacksonville, who both kind of suck too.
I have them just in front of Indy and New England. I'm so not buying into the Patriots.
So the Patriots aren't good. Their defense is legitimately good.
Yeah, but we've said that about the Patriots for a while, even since Tom Brady's left. So look, maybe this is the difference. I'm leaning away from teams with just only defense, the Browns at 24 and the Patriots at 27. You lean a little bit more into them. And this is why people have different rankings and what we think. And we know nothing. Hell, the 1:00 games, the Dogs went 8-2. So who the hell knows? But I will agree. The fact is we have the exact same teams, which means we have the exact same teams in the bottom tier. Is I go Dolphins, Raiders, Jaguars, Falcons, Bears, Browns, Rams, Colts, Patriots. Same teams, slightly different order. But if that's all a different order with the same teams next week, I could see it happening where that's the biggest thing. It's like, I think all these teams are in the same conversation.
So quick hits on some of these teams. I did want to talk about the Rams receiving core for a second because it feels like there should be someone to pick up there. Maybe. Jordan Whittington played all of the Cooper Kupp snaps the moment Cooper Kupp left. It wasn't Tutu Atwell. It wasn't DeMarcus Robinson. It wasn't Tyler Johnson. It was Jordan Whittington. So maybe he's the pickup?
So at preseason, when everybody was going nuts for what he did against the team's defensive number 2s, basically, and everybody's like, "Oh, Whittington," and I was like, "No, here's the problem with Whittington." I said this at that time. He replaces Cooper Kupp. If something happens, okay, go for it. But DeMarcus Robinson is the 3. DeMarcus Robinson's role does not change if Nakua or Kupp gets hurt. I actually thought that Whittington could step in even before Tyler Johnson if Nakua got hurt, because similar roles, but a little bit different. But I think that the order is DeMarcus Robinson still number 1. He should be the beneficiary of the volume increase, but the volume increase percentage-wise could be Whittington, because you just mentioned it. He played the cup role, and Tyler Johnson is going to be hurt, at least in my opinion, where somebody who was on go grab Tyler Johnson last week, it might not be that different than DeMarcus Robinson. But now that Cup is out, the other aspect of that game, Tyler Johnson played out wide. Tyler Johnson's not very good out wide. Whittington's not asked to play out there. Whittington stepped in the slot, played almost primarily the slot, and as you said, we're in the Cooper Cup role. So I'm not saying definitively go blow all your fab on Whittington over Tyler Johnson, but I think they're in the same conversation, and I would give the ceiling to Jordan Whittington over Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, I think Whittington's the best pickup of this bunch, unless you really believe in Tutu Atwell getting targeted on 40% of the reps that he run in the game. But yeah, listen, he might be a nice deep shot for like DFS. I wouldn't start him in a like season-long fantasy league, but would you pick up Jerry Jeudy if available, or Whittington right now?
Ooh, ceiling, I would play Whittington. I would pick up Whittington, but
Okay.
I think Jeudy is if you need a wide receiver 4. That's just like he's a guy like, hey, Adam Thielen range. He's like, look, he's going to go out there and put up some numbers every single week.
I don't want those guys. I'd rather go with the ceiling guy and see if he works out. So would you go Jalen Naylor or Whittington?
Whittington, because Naylor's irrelevant outside of only one scenario. That's why I said either one of them are out, and that doesn't look like that. If that even happens 1 week this week, Addison's going to be back and rolling in some time. So, and if they're both out, as I mentioned, I don't want Naylor anyway.
So I'll put Whittington at number 3. Quentin Johnson, Alec Pierce, then Jordan Whittington for me at number 3. I've updated the wide receiver pickup rankings in the description right now in the Mayo Media newsletter. That's the source for all of the real-time updates with this stuff. New England, yeah, good defense, bad offense. You don't want anyone on the offense outside of Ramondre. And I guess Hunter Henry. Like, between Hunter Henry and Brock Bowers, who I have Vegas at number... Like, if you had Sam Laporta right now, and listen, it's a slow start. Every tight end has been really, really bad. Let's say you had Laporta or Kelsey. Do you think you could rook someone into trading you Brock Bowers and a piece for one of those guys?
I think yes, but I actually think it'd be more so maybe Laporta, because I think people are legit concerned. I had my buddy text me last night and said, are we done with Kelsey? And I think people are full on panic in the first 2 weeks. What my concern for Kelsey is...
I'm one of those people, by the way. And I think I think that when we get to, if the Chiefs have to play in for a playoff spot in week 17 or week 18, he's going to be fine. In the playoffs, he's going to be fine. I think he's just out there like getting some cardio in right now.
Well, so, and watching that game, so I think the answer is not Kelsey. I don't even think the answer is Patrick Mahomes. I think the answer is Xavier Worthy needs to be firmly entrenched, the team treating him as such, as the 2, because you need somebody to pull back that secondary at this point of Travis Kelce's career. Look at that game. The answer was supposed to be Marquise Brown, but obviously he's out potentially for the entire year. Xavier Worthy did see an uptick from week 1, but not enough where like defenses are out there saying, hey, let's drop back, play maybe even a 2 deep a little bit more. No, they're still playing pretty close because Xavier Worthy isn't being fully implemented. Rashee Rice doesn't run those kind of routes. Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce are entering the same area of space. And now at Kelce's point of his career where he can't go to the boundary as well, can't go deep as well, and Rashee Rice is at his prime, Kelce's getting left out because he's just not getting open. So you get Worthy implemented more, start pushing that secondary back, give it some respect. And I think that's the answer to opening up Kelce at this point of his career. Whether or not that happens is a whole nother question. But I think similar to the old Larry Fitzgerald days, that's the answer for Travis Kelce.
Who's worse, Zamir White or DeAndre Swift?
I don't want either one of them. Zamir White's workload actually went up, and then he lost a freaking goal line touch to Alexander Madison.
Hey, Alexander Madison looked impressive in week 2 with his 4 carries for 1 yard.
Goal line touch mattered, or red zone touch. It was one of the two. But the fact is, Zamir White, like, the funny thing was, I was almost going to say DeAndre Swift because Khalil Herbert's playing 100% of the third downs, which is just, I mean, we all had concerns about DeAndre Swift falling off from the Eagles' use, but I don't think anybody was expecting Khalil Herbert to be the pure third down back.
And Travis Homer, like, eating into a lot of this as well, just randomly playing. And although Roshan didn't play a snap, he was active. Poor, that poor guy fell off the cliff. But they'll probably have to try him. The weird thing about Swift, even watching Sunday Night Football, was he still looks so fast getting to the outside, and he just tackled immediately.
So where I have the Bears at 23 is partly maybe because I'm feeling hope in the fact that this offense looks like trash. This is actually your argument for the Browns, which is funny. their defense was good enough that they almost came away with a surprise win in Houston. But everything is possibly going wrong. Caleb Williams, we've seen the stats, 3 net yards per attempt is the worst in blah, 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 blah time through 2 weeks, whatever it is. Caleb Williams doesn't look good. The running backs look like trash. The offense isn't clicking. Keenan Allen was out. Roman Dunze wasn't 100%. And that's the thing, is like, I could just see Caleb Williams progressing, given his talent as a rookie. Everybody gets healthy. Things started to get figured out. And by the middle of the season, we're talking about the Bears more in the conversation of the teens than they are now. But that maybe me wish casting on what I feel like is the worst case scenario. And they were still in contention to win a game. I just feel like it's going to get better.
I would tend to agree. And just even watching, like, Williams made so many just terrible mistakes, but he didn't have a ton of time. Like, if we're going to throw some blame, we're going to throw it on Caleb Williams. That is obvious. But whoever the random center that they were playing, and I think it was the right guard, just couldn't block anyone. But there was such a vast difference between watching Bryce Young play and watching Caleb Williams play. Like, when you watch Caleb Williams and the way that he can manufacture yardage and get away from defenders and then make horrible decisions and hit the defenders in stride, that part's not good. But like, he can get away from guys. He can create time. It's once it all settles in and the timing gets down for him, I think he's going to be fine. But as it stands right now, is DJ Moore even playable?
I'd say he's still playable, but he's in the conversation of Deontay Johnson and Terry McLaurin and Amari Cooper, where there are 4s and you're just hoping things get better. I'd still say DJ Moore's a wide receiver 3. The difference, and I'm glad you brought that up, is my biggest issue about Bryce Young, and thankfully we now have the switch at quarterback for us in fantasy, is Bryce Young will extend plays too, but the problem is he doesn't reset, and he basically looks like a high schooler, and I hate coming from him like this, but like a high schooler playing quarterback once he tries to extend the plays, like he doesn't know what to do. He's throwing across his body, off his back foot, unbalanced, 2 defenders, 15 yards short. Like he just loses it but the thing is like he's extending the play, but then just his mind just breaks. And I don't like, maybe he needs time. Maybe he should have sat his rookie season. But also, by the way, as we're doing breaking news on that Pacheco thing, surgery at least now 6 weeks. It keeps getting worse.
So someone's getting signed there. So I guess the whole point we tried to make about the fab for the Kansas City running backs is dip your toe into the water, bid on them all, whatever one you get, hopefully it works out. It reminds me a lot of the old school, as I always said, take the guy who no one else wants in Baltimore, and that will end up being the guy. And just have, like, they'll sign Hunt or they'll sign someone else. Then you're just not going to know, and just get a piece of it because it's obviously a valuable position. But just know that, like, you're not going to sign up for a guy and he's going to be the guy right away. Like, you could just be dead wrong and have wasted all your fab. Like, if you don't need it, even if you have Pacheco, maybe you have someone as a better option. But I'm thinking about the week 3 rankings right now. Like, I mean, it sounds like you really hate Chuba Hubbard. I don't mind him as much, just because I think that he'll get more involved. We saw him more involved, especially before the game got completely out of hand again, that he was playing way more than Miles Sanders in week 2 than he did in week 1. They weren't going 2 drives for 1. It was just more Hubbard all of the time. That I would still probably play Hubbard over both those guys.
I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, looking at the touch percentage, it was still 58-42. It still doesn't give me. And again, Miles Sanders, 100% of the third down touches. Like, it just, I don't feel great about it.
Okay. The other teams in there, Miami. Do you think there's a huge drop off with Skylar Thompson for Hill and Waddle?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
significantly?
Skylar Thompson.
Like, listen, is Skylar Thompson that much worse than Tua?
Yes.
I don't know about that.
Not even a question. Not even a question. Tyreek Hill is still a wide receiver 1, similar to Justin Jefferson of like, look, he can play with anybody, but being the wide receiver 1 is now in question. And Jalen Waddle being from a definitive top 15, 18 wide receiver, back end wide receiver 2, maybe probably more of a wide receiver 3 fringy. I mean, if we did a rankings list, he'd probably still be in that 20 to 25 range and nitpicky there, but that's different from being potentially the number 1 wide receiver and a top 15 wide receiver when healthy for Jalen Waddle. So it's enough of a downtick. The Dolphins are here because I don't know if they're going to try and play Tua again this year, because we've seen everybody saying like, just shut it down, retire, don't come back, and for his health. But he's a gamer. They know he's the better quarterback. They know they have playoff aspirations again this year. Reason might not win out here. They might just go for what potentially could happen on the field. So yes, I think it's a downtick, and I do think that Tua could potentially return. If you told me Tua never comes back, I'd rank the Browns to go back to the Browns. I'd rank the Browns.
Tua's coming back. Like, let's not pretend like he's not coming back. He's coming back at some point.
That's why I said. That's why I brought it up. I'm just going through the entire scenario here.
So then Jacksonville and Indy, I don't really have anything to add on those. Evan Ingram being out like last second sucks. Getting hurt in warm up, if you like missed that news, that's horrible for your fantasy team. And if it cost him this week in warm ups, I doubt he plays week 3.
That's certainly fair. I will say on the Jaguar side of the thing, Christian Kirk has a legit concern now because he's dropped down to the 3rd on the options because he's coming off the field in 2 wide and in single wide receiver. It seems to be a lot of Gabe Davis. So I think he was still out there for a route or 2 more than Brian Thomas, but the usage and how they're treating him on the field, because they're asking him to block some too in the runs, I have concerns about Christian Kirk. Although, you get that one play that wasn't called back and the people aren't as panicked.
Actually, no, let's talk about streaming defenses for the week. I have a list for you, and I'd made this before the Andy Dalton news came out, but
You want to tell about the trash teams at the bottom?
Vegas. Well, I mean, this is a part of tier number 8. So I have Vegas against Carolina as the number 1 pickup defense. It would be the Bears. I think the Bears are like 58% owned. Just pick up the Bears D. They're a good fantasy defense every single week. Just play them. I don't think it matters who they play. Vegas at home against Carolina, Dalton or Bryce Young. I don't think it really matters. I mean, it matters, but I still think they're a good defense to play this week, and they're widely available. New England at the Jets on Thursday night, I have at number 2. Tennessee at home against Malik Willis and Green Bay at number 3, even though they're going to face a ton of running if they could just get up in that game. Hard. We'll see how that goes for them. But I've actually been quite impressed with Tennessee's defense. Indianapolis at home against Chicago. Just saw Chicago play. The Bengals at home against the Commanders, Tampa at home against Denver, Seattle at home against Miami and Skylar Thompson, even the Giants at Cleveland. You could do worse, I think.
Did you say the Packers at Tennessee?
No, they were 2 owned.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, like, against Malik, or I was about to call him Malik Willis. Malik Levis.
Yeah,
Levis,
Malik Levis. I would have the Packers at number 2 on this list if they weren't 2 owned.
Okay, actually, I had them 3 behind the Raiders. So I'm with you. So again, the difference in rostership being 50 versus 60%. I go Bears, Raiders, Packers. So you do have them? Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would have the Bears at number 1 as well. So the bottom teams, tier number 8, the Dregs. Although Carolina should probably be on a tier by himself. I have Tennessee at 28, Washington at 29, Denver at 30, the Giants at 31, and Carolina at 32. Washington's offense is fun. If they could find out a way to score a touchdown, I think they could have like a fun offense and a terrible defense and just play some entertaining games, but they just can't punch it in as of right now. And I do think that Tennessee's defense is really good.
Yeah, so I go, the last 5, I go Titans, Commanders, Giants, Broncos, Panthers. I think the Broncos are worse than the Giants, although it's relatively close. The Giants scored 3 touchdowns, and they made history, Pat. The first team ever to score 3 touchdowns and not give up a touchdown and lose, mostly because they didn't have a kicker on top of that. The Commanders, I could see them sliding up a few spots to what you just said. Interesting enough, you saw Jaden Daniels make some of those really nice throws over 15 yards downfield. Hey, Cliff Kingsbury, maybe call some of those. And that's why you brought up the thing I said about Noah Brown last week earlier in this episode, is Noah Brown in deeper leagues, stash him. He just needs to learn the playbook. And he'll be the number 2. Let's remember what he did with the Texans. And that, by the way, if you remember too, that was also with him missing practice last week.
Oh yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah, well, he was inactive last week too, so hopefully he can get up to speed. I like Noah Brown a lot as a deeper league pickup, but I'm just prone to Noah Brown. He won me like $20,000 last year on DraftKings in his giant game, so I just love Noah Brown. So yeah, Titans good D, Washington potentially good offense, and the other 3 are just terrible. Malik Neighbors is good.
Malik Neighbors is good. What do we have? 60-something% of the target share? That's what we hoped for, that it could offset. But again, it's still going to be limited by Daniel Jones and potentially not scoring touchdowns. I'll ask you the question I asked on Twitter yesterday, Pat. Do any of the Giants, Panthers, or Broncos win 4 games this year?
Panthers. Who was it?
Broncos and Giants. Do any of those 3 teams win 4 games this year?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know which one. Maybe, listen, Bryce Young is benched. We've kind of buried the lead. Andy Dalton is starting.
So the Panthers?
It could be the Panthers. I don't know. I think they're a lot better with Andy Dalton.
They should be.
I think they're competent with Andy Dalton at least. Like he'll complete.
Yeah, but
you won't see a stat line. Maybe you will. And this will look foolish, but Andy Dalton's not going to be 7 of 12 in the first quarter for 9 yards. That's not happening. He might be like 0 for 12 for 0 yards, but if he's going to complete 7 passes, it's going to be for more than 12 yards.
A, I don't disagree with you. B, let's look at the schedule and Raiders, even with Andy Dalton.
That could be a win.
Bengals, Bears.
Like that's not them beating the Raiders in Las Vegas is not outside the realm of possibility.
Oh, I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying for the total wins. I was going somewhere different with this. So you have the Falcons, the Commanders. Actually, the Falcons, Commanders, Broncos, despite those two being on the road, is certainly winnable. And then the Saints, and then the Giants at the game we joked about last week in Germany, and then they hit their bye at week 11. The only reason I say this is to say there are actually winnable games in there if Andy Dalton doesn't destroy the offense the way Bryce Young has. The side I was going to say is if only 2 of those are wins and you head into the bye at 2-8, the Panthers are going to be thinking, why not at least see if Bryce Young's figured anything out? Andy Dalton is not the future quarterback, not 2025 even. Let's just make sure Bryce Young isn't toast and we don't need to redraft a quarterback in the top 3 picks. So I don't think the Panthers going much higher is a real answer because I don't think Andy Dalton's making it through the end of the season as the starter.
I could see Denver getting some wins because they're not. I don't think their defense is as good as the Titans, but I think their defense is pretty good.
Their defense is pretty good, and especially with Surtain.
Yeah, like they can limit teams. So it's no different than some of these crowd. Like that's why I like the teams, like especially in the bottom half of this list. I just feel like the teams with the better defenses can just get fluky wins, even against good teams if their defense shows up that day, where it doesn't normally work the other way. Like Washington might beat a good team along the way, but it's more likely they just lose 40-34 at some point.
Yeah. And I'll agree with that. And that's why the Raiders, decent defense, pulled off a win against the Ravens.
Yeah,
they did score 20-something points.
Yeah, I mean, Bowers and Davante look good.
It did.
What's going on with the Ravens offense? I hate to tell everyone that the Isaiah Likely going to score 5,000 fantasy points isn't going to happen. But this is how bad tight end has been so far through 2 weeks, that he's still the number 1 tight end.
I know. Tight ends, I told Meany on the show today, I was like, remember I laughed at you when you said tight ends back this year? I was like, we've been saying that same damn thing for that way. People have been saying this for the last 10 years. That tight end is never back. Stop. Tight end has a few good options. The end. The Ravens, going to go a little bit more in the article than I did on the pod when I brought it up, but watching a lot of that game and watched it back this morning a little bit, is the Ravens offense is the same concern I had about Derrick Henry with the DeMarco Murray change when he went to the Eagles and running out of shotgun and a pistol and not being as effective. Look, Derrick Henry's still getting the end zone. It's fine. He's still going to get his touchdowns, but you see Justice Hill sprinkled in, and there's 2 aspects of it. It's not mutually exclusive here. The Ravens offense looks off. The Ravens offense also has a lot of really good weapons with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that makes up for it being off, because you saw the plays yesterday. But it looks like they're a little bit predictable at times because of how Derrick Henry is used and the fact that he's not the best out of shotgun and pistol. So with Justice Hill in there and their 2-minute drill, and things just seem a little bit predictable, I think it can be fixed. But the Ravens offense looks not broken, but it's off. It's off right now, and it needs fixing. But I don't know if it can happen because Derrick Henry is not a great fit for their offense.
I think that's very well said. And he's gonna be like the fancy version of Frank Gore from 7 years ago. He's just gonna get carries. He's gonna get 0 catches, and you really have to hope he scores a touchdown to be running back 13 for the week. And then he'll have in like one game where he goes
from last year.
What's that?
I said, or is Gus Bus from last year?
Yeah, very, very much so. Maybe a little bit better version because I think that he'll be on the field more.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, viable options,
that,
like if you have them on. But if you drafted Derrick Henry as if he's going to be like this lockstep potential top 5 guy, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out that way.
No, agreed.
All right. I think that's everything. Let me just very quickly, with those bottom 5 teams, just tell me the guys that you would want to play on your fantasy team. Not to own, like stash deep or whatever. Tennessee, Pollard and Ridley?
Yes.
It looks like Tajah Spears is probably going to miss week number 3. So good news. Pollard was already pretty good and getting all especially the first and second down work. If you add him onto third down as well, he could be like a top 15 guy this week.
Yeah. Pollard, yeah. Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, 100%.
Washington, Daniels, Brian Robinson?
Yeah. No, Brian Robinson, like definitively Brian Robinson. And then that's it definitively. Eckler and Terry McLaurin are like, you got to bench Terry McLaurin right now.
Yeah, like he's a flex if you need him, same as Eckler. And then Noah Brown is a stash D.
8 targets, 6 receptions.
It'll
22
come.
yards.
At least he's out there. He's running the routes. He's getting the targets. I feel like the production will
Yes.
come at some point. You just need to be patient with him because, look, I
Yes.
mean, you kind of made that case for Murray Cooper as well to see if it works out with Deshaun or Winston ends up coming in. I have a bit more faith in Jaden Daniels at this point to figure it out than Deshaun Watson.
Especially if Kingsbury lets him throw a little bit deeper.
Denver's offense, is anyone startable?
Nope.
I would
Next.
say no. Javonte Williams played way more than Jaleel McLaughlin this week, though.
That didn't even matter.
No, it didn't, but he did. Giants offense, Neighbors, maybe Singletary. He's on that like McLaurin level of flex for me.
Yeah. You kind of almost have to start him just because most people have Singletary as their RB2 went wide receiver heavy. And it's just, that's kind of what he is.
Carolina with Andy Dalton.
TBD. I think it could be Deontay and Thielen. That's it.
Not Leggett.
I still think Leggett needs to work his way past one or two of them. I don't think it's going to happen on Deontay. It could happen on Thielen as Thielen potentially nears the end, but I don't think it's happening yet.
All right. That will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. When is your next podcast coming out, Jake? Tuesday morning?
Yes, Tuesday mornings, Wednesdays, and then Thursday/Friday is the mailbag. Sunday/Monday is the recap. Those are both very short episodes, but Tuesday waivers, Wednesday rankings.
And you had an appointment earlier on today, but normally this show will come out around noon Eastern on Mondays, so it'll be there for your lunchtime. You just kick off at lunchtime, put on some PME. You can listen to Jake and I battle it through and talk about your teams. All of the teams, we got through them, 1 through 32. You can find the entire list down in the description right now. My waiver wire pickups and injury list is all in the newsletter. I provided the link down there as well. Code Mayo at Underdog right now will get you a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. So please go take advantage of that. I'll be back with Jeff and Gus for the spread picks, then rankings coming out on Wednesday. My rankings will be sent to everyone who is a sub to the free newsletter. Additionally, they will show up on ProFootballNetwork.com as well and be updated throughout the week. I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!